So I was wandering the Dollar Tree the other day and I came across this $5 RC car for sale. But what interested me was not the car itself, but the controller it came with. So I saw this controller and I figured most of the electronics and hardware is in this and the cost of manufacturing. So this quite possibly might be a $1 remote. I saw this controller and I was wondering, can I turn this into a gamepad? You know, like an Xbox remote to play video games on? And how awful would a $1 controller be to play on? Let's start at the beginning. How did I actually make this cursed controller work? So I found this at the Dollar Tree for $5. It's a 1/20th scale RC race car. It kind of looks like a Mitsubishi Lancer type body, or a knockoff of one. I love the Fast and Furious style brakes, no calipers. Why did I get this? It's actually because of the transmitter. It had me curious how like cheap they could make a wireless transmitter today. I just noticed on the box it had 27 megahertz, which is a really low frequency for RF, which means you can go quite far potentially, depending on the antenna setup. So let's get this thing apart. Let's see what it can do. I have plans for the transmitter separate from actually running an RC car. So that's why I'm interested in it. Interesting way to package that. I'm assuming this... Oh, I thought it unscrewed. Oh. Oh, wow. When I was a kid, these were like twist ties that were a pain to get out usually. That's way easier. Oh, the antenna's stuck. Alright, just cardboard. So here's the remote. Yep, that's what I thought. So these are not, as far as I can tell, potentiometers. When you get to the end of the travel, it clicks. Which means these are probably tactile buttons inside. So we have probably 4 tactile buttons over a 27 megahertz radio transmitter. Let's open the battery compartment to see if there's anything inside. This thing definitely did not come with batteries. Okay, there's one screw inside. Phillips head. I'll, go ahead and open this up. Oh, it's clipped together on top. Interesting. I just noticed that. Oh, there's ones on the bottom too. Oh, there we go. Got the bottom free. Oh. Gonna get this last clip out without breaking it. Come on. That is not budging. I'm just... Come on. Wait, can I... this is stuck. Why am I not surprised there's already Chinese on the circuit board? Also, I haven't seen circuit boards like this since I was like a kid. This thing looks absolutely ancient. Even that resistor looks really old. Like, modern stuff does not use through-hole components like that anymore. There's another screw holding in the circuit board. Oh, interesting. So it has these like plastic pegs for alignment. I'm surprised they didn't like cost cut further and delete the screw and just melt these plastic posts. I've seen that on some electronics. Oh, that's why. Oh no. The antenna is held in with the screw. I don't know if I like that. That's not a very good design. I mean, I'm criticizing the design of a $5 RC car. It's impressive they could even make them this cheap. But the antenna is held up against these contacts right here through the through hole on the back side. And then it has an IC here. I'm guessing that's for the radio transmitter. So the chip's labeled TX4, and then the bottom is A426. I wonder if that means it's transmitting on channel 4. Not sure. Most of my RC stuff that I've done in the past was on 2.4 gigahertz spectrum, so I don't really remember too much about the 27 megahertz. But I believe there's 8 channels for it. I could be wrong, but sounds about right. Put this back. Show some pressure on that. Yeah, okay. I want a good contact with the antenna. Are these exactly the same? Yep. Yeah, they're exactly the same. Ugh. Oh, it feels so cheap. Still gonna work there? I think so. All right. All right, that works. All right, now for the car. Switch is already on. That's fun. The thing that I do find funny about these is they're so much easier to work on than modern electronics or appliances. There's no like hidden screws. I'm curious what they're using for the steering servo. That's the antenna. Oh my, it's literally held in with like scotch tape. You know what's hilarious too is the wire is actually stripped and I think tinned. Yeah, I think that wire is tinned. guess that's the way of making a cheap antenna. So they didn't even really use a servo for the steering rack, which is interesting. I was expecting a really cheap servo. That's even cheaper than I was expecting. I was expecting like a little gear rack and pinion setup, but it's just like two metal, or not metal, two plastic posts. Let's take a peek at the electronics next. Work our way front to back. I think there's a weird smell to it. Oh, got it. It kind of smells like burnt electronics, like pre-burnt, if that's a good sign. This is a single layer PCB. That's also quite old in design. There is a inductor on the underside, but it's through hole, so it's actually going to the other side of the board. That's what the board looks like. Alright, so the first two pads are to the front steering motor. These next two pads going up are for the rear drive motor. This pad that's soldered through hole at the near the top is the ground wire to the battery terminal, which wraps under the board. And then the positive goes up over the top, which is kind of interesting. Do I want to take apart the smelly gearbox? I feel like that's where the burnt smell is coming from. It only has 2 screws. It looks like there may have been a third. Probably also cost cut that out. Either that or it was too difficult to assemble it with the short wires going straight over the thing. Oh, it's clipped on either side. Yeah, I don't think they needed 3 screws then. That's probably why they got rid of it. Alright. So, there's the internals. You got a little gearbox. I'm actually impressed they put lithium grease in there, it appears. Which is what you want on plastic gears. They are cheap plastic gears on a, I don't know, like some type of textured splined solid rear axle. There's one on this side too. So I guess they could install it either way. Yeah, not much else in there. It's just a cheap DC motor. Used to be able to get those from Radio Shack back in the day. Did the clip snap? There we go. Alright, so what do next with this? So what I actually want to do is pull this control board off the car for something. So I'm going to desolder these connectors. So here's the back side of that board. Some more Chinese that I don't know what it means. Interesting. So there's markings for 27N, which I'm assuming is 27 megahertz, even though there's not a hertz, and then 40 and 49. So maybe this is designed using the a change of the inductor or something to set the frequency depending on um, maybe what region it's for. Even though I'm pretty sure 27 megahertz works in like all regions globally without regulation issues. I don't know if it'll focus. Yeah, there you go. 27, 40, and 49. And then they labeled the pins, which is kind of nice, for uh, ground, VCC, forward, backwards, right, left. But yeah, I haven't seen single-sided PCBs like this in a very long time. This was like very common in early 2000s tech. Probably was a design in the early 2000s. It's a power-only USB, so if we just use this will just output 5 volts. Wow, did they actually use copper wire in this? A little bit more there. There we go. Oh my gosh. This stuff's so thin. I don't even think it's the correct gauge for USB power. In this case, the wire is the fuse. Just what you want. That's so thin, it just like heats up instantly. Alright. I guess we can use the ends of the wire from before. Do I test it? Probably should. If it was red and black, I would maybe just go for it, but who knows? I wired this. Let me turn off the soldering iron. Hi, Oakley. What are you doing? Yeah, red's positive. It's outputting 5.2 volts. Would help if I turned it on. There we go. Maybe shouldn't do that while it's plugged in with a recalled battery pack. Yeah, good enough for me. We just want to check the output of this anyways. So I'm going to grab some of these clip probes. And then let's do the L and R. So I'll do positive to the blue, which is L. And negative to the white, if I can get it on the solder blob. Yeah, that's probably fine. Okay. And then I'm going to hook it to my multimeter. So black to black, red to red. Okay, I'm going to plug it in. And then we're going to go left. All right. So left output's 5.2 volts. Right, or sorry, negative 5.22 volts, and then right outputs 5.18, positive 5.18 volts. Interesting. Yeah, what are you doing? Unplug that. I guess we can probe the voltage off the motor wires as well. I'm sure they're the same, but we'll clip black to forward and green to red, which is back. Plug that back in. So something I am curious about, if I ground this plug, if I go to ground, the other one is set up on back. If I hit it, oh, it would help if it was plugged in. Oh, interesting. Okay, forward goes to 5 volts. Connect this up. If I go backwards, it does 5.17 volts. So that's actually how I want to set this up for. And then these pins might be flip-flopped because forward is reverse in this case. So you're probably wondering how I turn this into a controller. This is how. This is a low-cost microcontroller running Python, hooked up to the receiver board from the RC car. And I have it running off the power on the microcontroller here. So I started first by hooking it up to 5 volts over USB, and you can see my probe attachments here. I was getting 5 volts signaling logic level output off the board, which is actually too high for most microcontrollers. I just went into my microcontroller scrap bin basically and grabbed this one out because I knew it supported USB HID. Unfortunately, it's micro USB, but I have an adapter USB-C for that. So this is a Adafruit Trinket M0, I believe, running CircuitPython. Last time I used this was back in like 2018, so it was running like version 2 of CircuitPython. I had to upgrade it to like 13 or something to get their USB HID libraries to work. But yeah, this uses 3.3 volt logic level. So if I were to just power this off of this USB cable here, that would probably fry the board. I'm assuming it's not 5 volt tolerant, and I don't really want to find out. So now that I'm actually looking at this, I shouldn't connect this, and I don't want this anymore because this is just a thing for future me to absolutely screw up. So I'm just gonna cut it off now. There we go. Now I'm not gonna fry that microcontroller. After I finished the testing, was I hooked it up to the 3.3 volt and ground outputs from this microcontroller to the main power leads of the RC receiver board, and I tested the output of that before hooking it to the microcontroller, and that was outputting 3.3 or 3-ish volts, right? So that's a safe level for the microcontroller to work with. So I hooked it up to the pins. Well, they're labeled 0, 2, 3, and 4. But I believe this had different numbering internally to the software. So I think pin 0 is actually like 1 or 2 or something like that. So I pretty much just used Adafruit's HID keyboard library example for this. Main difference being I modified it. The library they had the pins pull up. So the pins were at 3 volts, and then you would ground, or 3.3 volts, and then you would ground them whenever the signal was active. In this case, since this receiver board is already outputting 3.3 volts active, I switched it to a pull down, an internal pull down. All right, so if I input a movement, you'll actually see this red LED indicator flash up here. Or one odd thing you might notice is there's little twist ties in the probe clamps here. It's because some of them, the wire was so thin, it was like grabbing into it and not getting good contact. I just put a twist tie, an insulated twist tie as the backing for it, and shoved the wire in to the probe clamp above the twist tie. So that resulted in pretty good contact. I did that for a few of them. All right, so this is the code I put together for the controller. I reused some of the existing example from the Adafruit HID CircuitPython library. I put the pins I was using, 1, 2, 3, and 4, which don't quite map up exactly to the hardware pin IDs. You got to check that on this board specifically. And then I put in the key codes I wanted for WASD, and I left the shift for some reason. I don't know why I did that. I'm not actually using that. So I do use some hacky timer stuff to make this work, because this thing is pulsed. The input from the controller is pulsed, and if it runs too quickly as well, it won't read correctly in games. So if you notice some weird things going on with timers starting with this, that's part of it. So yeah, I pulled down the internal resistor, I guess, for the signaling pins. They're normally pulled up in this library example, since I already am working with 3.3 volts as input. This is the LED indicator for when it receives input, just for debugging purposes. Well, it's commented out, but I do have some debugging in the console log that you can connect to over serial. So this is to update the state based on the signals received. There is some weird timers, and I also have some special conditions for forward. I use a flag to set NOS being on, so I can play like Need for Speed and other racing games that have nitrous set. Because if you leave it continuously held down, you only get one shot of it in most games. I have backwards set to re-enable nitrous, And then I have steering in one direction set to disable it, so it doesn't stay on continuously as you're driving. Which also means you can only use NOS in one direction steering, which is interesting to adapt to. I'm sure there's a multi-key combo thing I could do to get this to work in a less hacky way, but honestly this entire product is hacked together, so I don't really care. Yeah, and then I have the LED indicator light shut off after the value or key is released. Yeah, so that's a quick look at the code. This is odd to do in Python. Normally I would do this in C on a Arduino, but I didn't seem to have one in my scrap bin that does USB HID. So this controller actually just reads as a keyword in software. So if I press right on the controller, it'll input a D. And if I, push left on the controller, back, S. If I hit forward, it's a little bit different. Does W and Z and kind of spams it until I hit back, and then it'll cancel it back out. Because back also releases the key. So with the input set like that, I'm able to map it into any emulator or Steam game pretty easily. The only caveat being you have to have a game that can kind of be played with 4 to 5 buttons, unless you want to write some even more cursed software. All right, so I got my GameCube controller mapping set up here. Let me load the cursed profile for this controller. And we'll start this up. All right, so I got Need for Speed Most Wanted loaded up here. This is the GameCube version. I had to turn off the music because I wasn't sure if this would be taken down due to copyright or something. Didn't know this game had ambient sounds in the main menu if you disabled the music. They only seem to be on when you turn off the music though. So the only thing I didn't map was A, and you kind of need that to go through the menus in this game, so I'm just going to use my keyboard just to go through the menus. You can technically go left and right using the controller, but... Alright, there's proof you can win the race with it. This actually has less input lag than some Bluetooth controllers I've used, but it has way more lag between inputs because of the timing delays I had to add to get this to work. So that part's not great. The turning is a little trickier than you'd think. But the controller also is better than overall than you would think it would be. It's just, yeah, that's the hard part right there. You can only turn left using nitrous. RX-7. The antenna on this is so long, I'm actually worried about hitting the screen. Back to the St. Nitrous. Time to pick it up. Alright, so what is this thing like to drive? It surprisingly has a lot less input lag than some other Bluetooth controllers I've used, in the sense that once you press a button, the action happens. Did it just time out on me? I might have bumped the USB cable. Yeah, so there's not a ton of input lag when you're like first making an action, but because it has to hold down using a timer, like every key press, there's a ton of lag between different inputs. So if you like are turning right and want to turn left, there's quite a bit of lag there. Yeah, that part's kind of tricky to get to master how to drive. The reset NOS with reverse is sometimes nice, and sometimes it like is really hard to trigger due to that multi-input latency or timer latency between holding key presses. But overall, it's surprisingly playable. for a $1 controller. I've had a friend play on it too, and he agreed that it was definitely playable. It's in a lot of ways better than you would think, but it's also worse in some ways due to the pulsing of it. It's not like a continuous key press when you hold, it's sending pulsed inputs. So that plus switching inputs is quite tricky on it. But I'd give it like a 7 out of 10 in the realm of cursed controllers. All right, so now that I've proved that this works with the prototype breadboard, I'm gonna work on the final thing, which will be soldering up some jumpers to connect directly to the microcontroller so I can get my breadboard back and make this thing a little bit more durable. I still want to use jumpers for the microcontroller just in case I want to scavenge it for another project in the future and still make it usable. That's why I'm not going to solder it directly in or anything like that. I want to make this as straightforward as possible. So for me, black means ground, at least in a DC circuit. So I'm going to use black. Red is going to be your 3.3 volts positive. So I'll put that to the side. And then I have off the main board, I got white, blue, green, and yellow. I guess since these are jumpers, we can kind of just repin it to the microcontroller after the fact. So I'm not super concerned with that. So I'll start disassembling this then. Actually, I'm going to leave that adapter plugged in. Just unplug the USB-C cable and get it out of the way. All right, I'm back from getting the heat shrink done. So now we got to hook it up to the microcontroller. Most important thing would be to hook up power correctly first. Don't want this going to 5 volts and frying stuff. So I'm going to look for the 3 volt pin or 3.3 volt. I'm not sure if it really matters on direction. So put that there. Ground is actually up top here. It is this one. I think I might just go for trial and error here. Back is forward, I think. So let's do, I think I mapped forward first. So let's go into 0, pin 0. And then I'll just check that really quick by plugging it in. Oh, that's returning S. So maybe forward and back weren't reversed like I thought. So then that would mean yellow is technically forward. I don't know, I thought those were... Okay, that's working for back now. Oh, maybe, yeah, maybe they were flipped. They were just flipped in software. Okay, so back, I think it goes to, oh, I think these pins are like out of order. So I think it's pin 2. I'm being brave and connecting this while it's running. Yep, that's it, pin 2. Okay, and then I think the other one's 3 and 4. So, yeah, 50-50 chance, right? I'm not lucky, but then I only have to switch it once. I don't really recommend hooking stuff up live like this. It's a good way to short something out. I already connected power, so as long as I'm connecting the USB or battery, it should be fine. Okay. Left is A, right is D. I was actually lucky for once. All right, so that's working. All right, so there's the final kind of wiring for the receiver microcontroller for the cursed dollar store game remote. I think it's ready for some gaming. I almost forgot, no project can be complete without a zip tie. Let's check it one more time. Yep, works great. And for a final touch, since I saved this thing from the e-waste bin. There you go. The McDonald's paint job on the Lamborghini. Pretty sure I just pushed that car up to speed. Couldn't turn though because it was gonna kill my nitrous. Oh no. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one.